thank you to our audience members for joining our medical device panel here at the RESI conference. I am delighted to have such a wonderful panel, and I will introduce the moderator who will then introduce the rest of the panel. Just keep note, you can use either the chat or the Q&A feature if you would like to ask any questions, and we will, the panel will try to address them either during or at the end of the chat of the panel. So with that, Dave Uffer, I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Dave Uffer. I'm the Vice President of the MedTech practice at Alera Health. Alera is a global advisory firm with practices across medical affairs and regulatory, clinical affairs, strategy consulting, and investment banking. I myself have been with Alera about 5 years. 25 years prior to that, I've been in MedTech in strategy and business development, deploying capital and venture investing from corporates, as well as M&A licensing and distribution deal structures. I'm pleased to have 4 panelists here that are going to represent different interests in different firms in investing in early stage companies. I'm going to make a quick introduction to Sam Goldberger, Kristen King, Catherine Hill-Ritchie, and Ruchi Dana. Let them tell you a little bit about themselves and their fund. Then we'll take you through a series of different questions and dialogue about how they deploy capital, what their interests are, how you can engage with them, and how and when you would approach them. And then at the end of the session, we'll open up to any audience questions that you want to ask specifically of them or as a group. So to start that, Sam.
Hi, everyone. Sam Goldberger. I'm a physician by training. I'm an ophthalmologist with a specialty in plastic and reconstructive surgery around the eyes and face. I practiced in Southern California for 24 years. And then I wanted to do something more global. So I actually moved my family out from sunny California. We moved to Boston. I went to business school. I got an MBA in a one-year program at MIT. And then I started working in a private equity company doing a large ophthalmology roll-up that went great. And I decided to do something on my own. So I formed a family office, which was going to be in early stage healthcare investing, and did that for a couple of years to try to get the infrastructure necessary. And a few months ago, we decided to launch our fund. We actually closed the first round of the fund about a month ago, and we're called Ambit Health Ventures. We focus on early stage healthcare in the digital health and medtech spaces. We're interested in seed and A rounds. We focus on must-have innovations. So we feel that's very important for whatever technology there's out there that either needs to save time, money, or improve some outcome. And we like to deal with companies that have shorter exit horizons, meaning they have lower regulatory risks. So we like 510K pathways, we like digital health approval processes, things like that.
Thank you, Sam. Next would be Kristen King.
Hi, everyone. Kristen King. I'm here as a member of Boston Harbor Angels. Delighted to be here today. We've been around since 2005, a long history of significant experience with executives in a broad area of disciplines. So our portfolio really stretches across not only medical devices, but also the life sciences, consumer, energy. Our vision is to invest for a better world. So similar to Sam, really the early stage environment and breakthrough innovation to really fill those unmet gaps across lots of different disciplines, and look forward to getting into more details as we go. Personally, I have been a med device gal for the last couple decades on the large corporate side, so I'm just thrilled to help on the investing and startup side. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. Catherine, next in line.
Sure, thanks for the invitation to be here today. So I have been working in the investments world for 18 years in the US and in Europe. I've worked for 8 single family offices for billionaires, investing in funds, companies, divesting from companies, buying secondaries, so all across the transaction space. For the last 4 years, I've worked for the Nottingham Spurk family office, They're an interesting group. They're based in Cleveland, Ohio, and we also have a large operating company, which is an industrial design firm. So we have a unique investment mandate where we actually work on the devices. So we have a team of 75 biomedical engineers, mechanical, electrical, machinists, prototypers, and a 60,000 square foot prototyping shop. So we can help the companies that we work with actually from design through to commercialization. So I'll get more into that later, but that's a great introduction about Nottinghamsburg.
Thank you, Catherine. And finally, we have Dr. Ruchi Dana with the Dana Group of Companies.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Dr. Ruchi Dana. I represent Dana Group of Companies here in Dubai. So I've logged in here from Dubai. I'm a medical doctor and a Stanford MD, and I come from a family of doctors, and our operating business is into manufacturing of steel and oil, but we do have a hospital and a nursing college back in India as well. So that actually helps us in terms of due diligence. So in terms of investments, we invest mainly into the healthcare field. And we invest globally, not just in the Middle East or Asia. We focus a lot on medical devices, digital health, longevity, and elderly care. And in terms of the team that we have, it's not really very big, but the hospital and the nursing college, doctors, and the entire ecosystem that helps us quite a lot in terms of like doing the due diligence for healthcare companies. So that's the reason we focus only on healthcare companies at the moment. Thank you.
Great. So some folks that are really focused on medtech. I love it. Let's start just global trends and big picture, and then we'll boil down into each of the individual funds and you as individuals, operators within those funds. Ruchi, what have you seen in investing in early stage for trends globally in medtech? When I look at the data, whether we pull that from any source, we'll work with Silicon Valley Bank often and look at their reports and so forth. We've seen a little bit of lumpiness in the investing in medtech. Digital goes back and forth. It sometimes saw a little bit of slowdown, and now digital this past year has come back, even on the commercial side. Tell me where each of you here are investing more early stage, the trends that you've seen in early stage investing across medtech.
Sure. So in terms of medtech, there are certain cycles that come and go. So like initially there was a lot of focus on medtech because there are some good acquisitions happening, but later on, like a number of angel groups, and even we realized that like the number of acquisitions that would happen in medtech would not be that big. So in terms of like the return that you get on medtech, sometimes it becomes like limited, and that's the reason it's sort of a limitation if you start a medtech company. But there are ways to go around it. Like if you start a medtech company with a global focus, specifically like if it could be something like a frugal innovation or low cost medical device, then I think like there's huge potential for such medical device companies. So I personally took the Stanford biodesign course at Stanford, and in that they have like engineers, doctors, lawyers, PhD students, everybody sort of comes together to solve for unmet clinical needs. And a lot of low cost medical devices come out of that program. So I've seen a lot of success from that program. So I think models like that, which actually have a global focus, would actually work more. Yeah, in the recent times, last year again, like there was a lot of focus on digital health, specifically a lot of companies that were working on remote patient monitoring, outcome-based approach. I think that was something interesting. We did make an investment in that sector, but there were a number of companies that were working on COVID-related products. So like personally, we didn't make any investment into such companies because we are more of a long-term investor and a patient investor. So we thought that COVID might not be there for more than a couple of years, but there might be some of those ideas that would be applicable to some other diseases as well. So I think like there is scope of the new medtech companies that have emerged just because of COVID.
Kristen, anything you would add as viewpoint as well as the general trends?
Sure, I'd say from the general trends, it's more creative, especially with the wearables, the digital. And then if you look at the large corporates, a lot of the M&A, we see across the gamut, a lot more activity with not only the telehealth and the digital, but also in ortho and cardio. So I think it's exciting. And then I would encourage folks, a lot of the device companies that come in look for partnerships with the therapeutic. So there's more of the diagnostics that partner and bring in ways they can accelerate pharmaceutical. So it's a real exciting time for creative med tech.
Yeah, a category that hasn't been explored so thoroughly, but absolutely starting to get a lot more traction. Sam, things that you would see in the market aside from what has been discussed?
So I actually want to emphasize what Kristen said. I've been seeing a lot of devices that are kind of integrated with digital health. And that's the way to go for the future. It really is. Standalone devices are going to be wonderful, but if you can somehow incorporate it into something to do with digital health, it'll just be more valuable and integrated and easy to, use across the whole medical community.
So are you saying that you would like to see traditional med tech companies as part of their build out of the company have digital solutions, or are you looking at digital technologies in and of themselves?
So I think it's the former. I think there should be digital solutions. Like for instance, if you're going to create some type of device, try to figure out a way in which you can have a digital solution to go along with it, right? And it won't work for everything. I mean, if you're going to be some type of device that's going to, like some big X-ray machine, that might not work, but there are a lot of imaging devices that are now being used on iPhones, right? And, that's the way to go in the future. Have everyone do it at home.
I guess I'd say I hear that loud and clear. At Alera, we engage companies, probably 80 out of the top 100 companies, and we're looking for example, in surgery, at advanced surgery. Had a lot of discussions even through RESI. We had a panel just on advanced robotics and advanced surgery, and every company is telling us now that not only what they need to do in advanced surgery, of course, there's many other fields in medtech, but in the surgical realm, even looking at AI and digital health relative to surgical technologies, absolutely imperative. So we're seeing that loud and clear. I guess I'd say on the digital health side alone, I was lecturing in Asia last year, or the end of 2019, about over the investment with $4 billion that's come into digital health just for investment, and not a lot of exits, because a lot of that world was partnering, but there was still a little bit of hesitancy to employ these technologies in the community. Certainly has been forwarded by at least 3 years, in my estimation, through COVID, where people were looking at use case and starting to get experience with the technologies. Not saying they validated all of them, but at least they understand the value proposition that they have, and they can be incorporated, or they didn't provide value into that into their practice. Catherine, do you look at digital health in that way? You've seen more uptake of that, and has that changed any of your theses into digital health?
Yes. So, I think like everyone in the panel has talked about, but there's some really interesting themes with automation, robotics, sensors, because you're right, with COVID eliminating the having to go into an office. If you can have a phone or a watch or something, or any device that can diagnose or track you, that is incredibly important and will become more important. But the key there is that you need good software, but you need good hardware, because if these devices don't measure accurately, then the data is worthless. So for us, we love focusing on the hardware piece of it and perfecting that. We only really focus on hardware exclusively. We don't do biotech or the other areas of life science, but digital plays an important role, but it's got to be combined together, because you need high quality diagnostics or sensors or robotics in the first place. Otherwise, they're not, if they're not executing well and collecting proper data or doing what they're supposed to, then it's all pointless.
Good. Well, we had I'm going to switch gears for a second. So that's some general themes that you're seeing in the marketplace, which is all encouraging. Seen a lot of dollars come back into medtech, which is exciting for us medtech folk. Let's talk about your individual funds, and tell us a little bit about the size of the fund under management, or how you go about deploying capital. what bite size you will typically take in an investment in your initial, Catherine?
Sure. So we're actually, we don't have a fund. It's a family office. And so the principals that founded Nottingham Spurk, John Nottingham and John Spurk, will seed companies. So we've had a lot of success by seeding early stage companies, PhDs out of universities. So Cornell, Case Western, examples like that. We've had some nice exits. We had a female PhD who had a great idea. We helped commercialize it and we sold it to Medtronic before we even manufactured one of them. So we do a lot of that work where we put in the initial capital. So what we might do is go through the university's tech transfer office, take some ideas, even fund a initial trial at a hospital or use our engineers to develop the device to see, does this work? Can it be built? Can it be manufactured at a reasonable price? Is there a market? So that could be a few $100,000 at first to obviously rolling into a few $1,000,000 for subsequent rounds. So that's usually our investment thesis with early stage med device companies.
And then you will reserve capital for follow-on rounds?
That's correct.
Okay. Does that come with any rights, or is that just being part of your ecosystem that they have the ability to engage you on the development and manufacturing side?
Well, the one thing that's interesting is we've got the operating business and then we've got the family office. So there's kind of a gray line in between. The operating business does take paying clients, but the family office is the investor part. So the operating business will always take paid clients, but obviously it becomes more interesting if we can invest. But they are separate. But we require that whatever we invest in, we help part of their commercialization process. So if someone's just looking for passive capital, we're not really the people to go to. If you need help with all of your commercialization, we are really the people to go to. But there are a lot of other people that are fantastic if they just want passive capital.
Got it. Ruchi, a little bit about your investment thesis and how you deploy capital?
Sure. So we again are really early stage investors. Our ticket size would be around $500,000 to $1 million for early stage companies, and then we do follow-up rounds as well. And apart from these early stage healthcare companies, we also engage sometimes on some opportunities like pre-IPO deals and all, but that would not necessarily be healthcare investments. Those would be as and when an interesting deal comes across. And apart from that, we are also LPs in some of the micro VCs, but those again are not healthcare ones, because the reason for being an LP in those micro VCs is just to get to be able to double down on the investments that they would be making into late stage companies, because we really are not the experts when it comes to any other assets apart from healthcare. So healthcare is the only focus that we have when it comes to direct investments. But for the other micro VCs, it would be sector agnostic VCs that we would sometimes do co-investments with. So that's mainly about our ticket size. And in terms of our outlook, it's mainly global. And we try to invest into startups outside of the Middle East, because our operational family business is so much consolidated within the Middle East that in terms of diversification, it makes sense to actually invest outside of the Middle East. So we invest into the US, we're looking a little bit at Europe, and we've invested into South Asia as well.
Very good, very helpful. Sam, a little bit about, you told us a little bit about Ambit, but how much is the fund that you just raised, and what size do you look to invest?
So our goal is to be a $20 million fund. We closed our first round at 5 million plus. So we're still fundraising as we are investing. We look for companies that are early stage, but we want them to have some traction first. We want to see some type of minimum viable product at least. We're not into seeing just ideas. We want a little bit, the company be further along than that. Our typical check size would be between 250 and $1 million. We're planning on supporting the portfolio companies. My partner, Naomi Fried, is a real thought leader in the digital health world. She was VP of Innovation at Kaiser many years ago. She started their telehealth program. She did the same thing at Boston Children's Hospital when she moved to Boston, and she worked a similar type of role at Biogen, doing it with digital health and pharma. So, you know, between me and her, we plan on really working with the companies. And one of the reasons we are in early stages, that's where we feel that we can help them the most.
Great. Held you back for last, Kristen, because there's a lot of different angel networks out there, and it represents a very different prospect of what the other three panelists here. And I like that diversity on this panel. Tell us a little bit about Boston Harbor Angels.
Sure. So similar to others, the early stage, but as an angel investing group under that 5 million, and really we're individual members. We do pool together for an active fund. I think the $500,000 to $1 million was spot on, and it depends. And really looking for that marriage versus the one-time investment to really help leverage the network and the expertise of the group to continue to invest and support and to syndicate across a really well-seasoned network, not only in the US, but globally.
Great. So when somebody were to come to Boston Harbor Angels, is it will they have, if 7 people raise their hand and say, I want to cut a check, do they get 7 checks, or does it come as one check from one organization? How does the cap table look when they do place capital to Boston Harbor? Why don't you walk some of the companies here through that?
Sure. And again, it depends on the interest of the company. Some of them come with a set amount and a minimum, and then it would be individual checks. And then if there's enough momentum for a fund to have a combined, that's another vehicle we use. And we really have a couple different tools to be able to flex and support depending on where that company is in their raising. And I'd say the biggest attribute for a company is that fundraising strategy, right? How are you going to get the next round? Have you raised enough to make it at least a year not to come back, and then really to be able to work with folks in even developing that if they haven't done this before, and leverage the expertise again to move that forward. So depends on whether it's a few folks that are really engaged and interested or the broader group. Then it comes through the process of screening and then presentation to the larger group, and then diligence like several others.
So let me ask, a lot of times if you're in the $500,000 to $1 million, maybe somebody's seeking $2 million, will you syndicate with other angel networks? And do you do that proactively? In other words, do you say, we're open to syndicate, you need $2 million, we've got $750 committed from BHA, but we can call up friends at LSA or Mid-Atlantic or Cherry Stone just down the road, or hey, you should call these 7 others and push that. How do you syndicate?
Sure, and it's both ways, right? We have folks that bring things to BHA, the groups that you just mentioned, Cherry Stones, LSA, as well as if we're leading a deal and just trying to engage the network and what the terms are, to be able to position that forward, and then the confidence and the momentum and interest from the entire group versus a few to really help put the startup in the best light forward to match the raise that they're looking for.
Do each 4 of the panelists here lead? Just a show of hands, you lead or you won't lead? Lead? Just Sam and Kristen. Catherine, your fund doesn't. You will lead, and Ruchi, you don't lead.
We rarely lead. Yeah, it's usually like there is some active lead investor, and then we don't usually piggyback on the due diligence, but like we don't usually lead around as well.
But so you do perform all your own due diligence, though.
Yeah.
Expected. That's really helpful. Let me switch up a little bit. If you're leading, do you then do you look for certain board rights when you take the lead, and how active on those boards do you become? Is it to the point where you're doing more than your quarterly board meetings and helping the company within your network, or it's look, we just want to see what's going on quarterly and help direct some of the activity?
Answer that.
Yeah, please.
So, you know, we always get a board seat, and we obviously, like I said, help with the commercialization. But what we also do is, usually we're the first dollars in. And in some cases, we even help find the CEO if there isn't one already, because a lot of times these tech transfer deals from universities, the PhDs are fantastic, but they're not necessarily interested or the right person to be the CEO. So we will help source that CEO and the company will spin out. And then we'll actually even help go around to our network and help raise this Series A, Series B. So I've got a couple examples right now where they're portfolio companies of ours and they are raising a B or a C. And I'll just go out to my network and say, by the way, take a look. If you're interested in investing, you invest right on the company in the cap table. You don't give any money to Nottingham Spark, but we were first dollars in. What we don't want is our CEO spending 6 months a year fundraising, especially in this environment. It's taking a little bit longer. And that then is less time away at the company, right? So we're very supportive in helping our companies in any way we can. We're very close to them. And we only do a few of these investments a year. So we are a real partner and want to help them raise capital, get partnerships, whether it be, even external like grants from the government or NIH or DOD or universities, et cetera.
You brought up three great themes. Let's continue on a couple of those, I guess. First off, Ruchi, do you take board seats as required or if available as a non-lead?
Yeah, so it's rarely that we get a board seat because our investment size is not that big, and usually there's a lead investor who negotiates the entire deal. But we do sometimes get board seats when we have a little bit bigger investments.
All right. Catherine, you brought up a couple of other very interesting points, a couple that I just had discussions actually this morning on and last week, and some of the clients that I advise, I said, you know what, you have about 6 months left and then you need to go away as the CEO and bring in that next stage. At another investor conference last year that I moderated, I had 5 folks that were 25 years in industry as executives with large commercial entities, some of the largest strategics in the market, and now they're CEOs. And of course, they didn't found the companies, they replaced the founder. How important is it to you, Sam, when you look at the management team behind it? Are you investing in the team or the technology? When I was corporate, I always said, I bet on the pony and the investors here are betting on the jockey. I was going to dismantle the team at acquisition. So it wasn't as much about the team as much as they could get it across the goal line. But the investors a lot of time are looking at more so the leader or the team. Your thesis on that?
We look very closely at the team. At the end of the day, when you're acquiring something early stage, they're not ready to be replaced. So you need to go with whoever's there. They're more passionate about their product. They're going to work harder for it. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. So you need a lot of sweat equity in it. And the only people really to do that are the original founders. However, once it reaches a certain point, I do have this, actually, I ahead of time have discussions with them. If I feel that they're great to take the product to maybe clearance, but not great for afterwards, I'll have a discussion with them ahead of time. I'll say, what happens when it comes time to marketing and we think that you're not the best person for it? Or I ask them, do you think you would be the best person to be CEO down the line once you get approval? And usually most of these people are reasonable. If they say, no, I want to be CEO no matter what, I could do it, and I don't really feel they can, I probably will not invest. It's just not worth getting into that fight. There are a lot of good companies out there, and I just don't think it would be beneficial. But a lot of times I'll have these people, they'll say, my passion is to get this product out there. And, if I end up being either chief medical officer, chief technology officer, things like that, I'm happy. We'll get a CEO. It'll increase the value of the company. That's the goal of ours. That's our goal anyway. And, we're on board with that. So, it's important to have these discussions ahead of time because then you know where you're going.
Thanks, Sam. Kristen, you're in one of the top 3 medtech hubs in the country. So you see a ton of companies being developed, if not locally. Of course, you can invest anywhere across the U.S., but just in Boston. a lot of seasoned executives coming out of the large strategics, as well as really innovative entrepreneurs, whether they're coming out of university or even some of the incubators that we have here. Tell us about your experience in seeing some of these founders and where you're looking to invest. Again, the management team, the technology, how you go about looking to invest with that person in place for a certain
Sure.
amount of time.
Great topic and great responses. And it's really that balance of both. And to have that technology, but that jockey and that team to be able to passionately tell that story so that you have that engagement early on and that vision of where that's going, to be able to, as was mentioned, this is a long journey, be able to pivot, to be able to have actionable plans on inflection points and milestones. So we're early, but to have that mapped out so that the team and the cap table and the founders are, and their path forward is just as important as the technology and the innovation. So there are a lot of different technologies, not only in Boston, but that come, from the West Coast, from international. And the biggest gap, I would say, is to have really that extreme expertise in the technology, and then not as much experience with what's your fundraising strategy? How much money do you need? Can you go run and syndicate and raise money? And the passion, can it be coached, and are they flexible, right? And that's really the big key. And do you listen? And do you put yourself in an investor's point? And can you communicate to that what's relative to having that cut a check in your technology? You see about 150 deals a month. So what's the differentiation? And it's really a blend of the technology and the team.
Yeah, great. Strangely enough, that within all those services I mentioned at Alera, we also have Alera Ventures, and we are appreciative of having the ability to influence or help. I don't want to say influence, more so help any of our invested companies with anything in regulatory or the clinicals and even on the banking side. And then oftentimes, look, we don't do everything. I can tell you, I get asked at least once a month, I need a CEO, I need somebody for a board. Do you have a great chief technology officer that we're looking to replace? And it's, I guess your investors are quite a bit of help when they have a strong network. Tell me a little bit about some of the networks that you have within your organization and where you bring some added value beyond just, who's going to be on the board. And I can ask one of my partners for, a great X, Y, or Z. Catherine, you seem like you have just a very interesting company behind you on the operating side. A little bit more about some of the network that you integrate with?
Absolutely. So Nottingham Spark is based in Cleveland, Ohio. So Cleveland Clinic is obviously a real go-to neighbor. And both John Nottingham and John Spark are on the board. But we also have the University Hospital System, the VA Hospital, Case Western University, and those are such great resources, and alumni networks as well. Obviously, all the Boston people have amazing networks, university and likewise, but ours are also global. I mean, we've worked with the huge healthcare companies, Johnson & Johnson and Cardinal Health and you name it, working on various devices that are interesting to them. So we try to bring all those players in as well. And then my background is more from the venture capital, private equity, and family office world, which can bring us great leads in terms of external funding, but also board seats, distribution. Like Ruchi was talking about hospitals. I mean, we've got devices that could be in hospitals all over the world. So meeting people who have those connections and are part of our broader network are really beneficial to our companies as well. So yeah, it's not just us at the table. We're trying to bring all of those to really help all these companies move forward.
Great. Ruchi, you bring a different geographic perspective. Obviously, you're saying global, and you want to be more as global as you can, but tell me a little bit about the network that you have that bring to bear with any of your invested companies.
Yeah, so since we come from a family of doctors, we do have a good network in terms of like doctors. So that helps us quite a lot in terms of due diligence and in terms of support, especially to the portfolio companies. If they need to like connect to a doctor in certain specific specialty, we can actually help that in many times. And also a family business is really spread across not just the Middle East, but also a little bit into Central America, Africa, Asia. So that again helps quite a lot in terms of like access to global markets. I think that's one of the ways in which we can add value to the portfolio companies. And then the hospital and nursing college that we have in India actually helps quite a lot in terms of like small pilots or like in terms of data as well, because a lot of startups are these days looking for data or doing like POCs. So in that case, like the hospital definitely helps out. And apart from that, we are part of a number of family office networks, and that again helps us out in terms of like helping the portfolio companies raise the next round, and we can have like a co-investment with other family offices across the globe. So that again is a good value add, because like oftentimes I've seen a number of startups come to the Middle East just for fundraising,
Mhm.
and like a lot of these startups don't really understand the culture of Middle East, but like having a family like us on the like board would actually help them in terms of like the next rounds of fundraising, because we do have a network not just in the Middle East but also globally in terms of family offices.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, everybody brings something different to the table. Um, Catherine, you were saying this has been a really difficult conversation for a lot of my clients, and how much time they spend fundraising. Some said, "Look, I want to go back to running my company. I've spent 80% of my time fundraising," and then we all cheer when they get there when they get their round placed and they can go back to their day job. How much do you really expect your companies in, or how much help do you also afford to them in bringing together the syndicate? If you've decided this is an important investment, we'd like to invest. Is it something that you're very active in? Again, Kristen, you mentioned about a lot of the other angel networks. Sam, is this something that, hey, we're going to invest and you need to spend the greater portion of your time rounding out the capital, or is that something that you help with as well?
So no, we're going to help as well with that. I mean, we've already developed relationships with other early stage healthcare VCs, some family offices. We have plenty people that want to co-invest with us as well. So, you know, once we've done our diligence on a company, I have a feeling we'll be able to get lots of other investors. We certainly don't want the CEO spending all their time raising money. My feeling is as well that any company that we're so high on probably won't have a lot of problems raising money. You know, we're seeing a tremendous amount of deal flow in the early stage space right now that, and some amazing companies. It's really beyond what I could have imagined. That if you can just choose some of those, a lot of people are interested. So I have a feeling that in the early stage arena, it's not going to be as hard to raise capital once you have a good advocate on your side.
Thank you. Just a little quick housekeeping. We've got about 20 minutes left in the session here. I'd like to reserve about 10 minutes at the end for anybody in the audience here that would like to ask some questions specifically of any of the panelists. And also, please feel free in the chat box at the bottom of the Zoom screen, feel free to type in anything you'd like. Our host, Karen, will forward the question along, or actually introduce you if you'd like to ask a little bit follow-up from anything you type in there. Gonna shift gears again. Tell me about where you're sourcing your deals. Is it conferences like this? Are you attending one of these a week, a month, or you're well known that you get? You said, Kristen, you've got a lot of partners in Boston Harbor Angels and a lot of other participants. Is it 150 inbound for everybody every month, or you're really getting active in these types of conferences?
Yeah, active in conferences, active members, passionate members, and then we do have a team dedicated to this for deal sourcing and really going through the applications on site, referrals through Gust. So it's an exciting environment, and we have a lot of commitment from members and networks, and word of mouth referrals too. So I'd encourage folks, get to know your groups, their backgrounds, and reach out, even if you're early for questions, and just to build that relationship. That's part of the deal sourcing as well. It's about PR and promotion.
How about for you, Catherine? How do most of the folks make it to you?
Well, I've spent 18 years in the investments world, and I try to do my best to really stay connected, keep our profile high. I think with Nottingham Spurk, not a lot of people knew who they were. So part of speaking at conferences like this and getting out there, I've spoken at over 50 family office conferences, and that's an interesting area to spend time in. I would say, the thing about angels and VCs is that they can have great websites which are transparent. They can show you their investment mandate, their portfolio companies, but family offices sometimes aren't that transparent. So it's really more of a relationship development. It can take a little bit longer, but they also can be a little bit more flexible, because maybe if they think you have a really good idea, or there is some kind of, family member who suffers from something, that you might get an investment out of them, even though it's not necessarily in their wheelhouse. So it's a different kind of investor, but it might take longer. But yeah, speaking at conferences, I'm in touch with everything from company CEOs, universities, other colleagues, other funds. So, I just try to stay super connected and out there all the time.
Do you typically at things like this type of conference find ones that are high value, or is it mostly from the network that bring you your network that bring you, hey, here's a company of interest?
Both. I would say both. It's from all over. I try to just keep the channels open, because I think one of the issues that a lot of people think about family offices is that they kind of function in a silo. There's tons of gatekeepers. I'm considered a gatekeeper, right? I'm not a family member, but they need that, because we don't want to be overwhelmed with deals that don't make any sense for us. But at the same time, you don't want to be so closed off that you miss opportunities. So networking with other people, like after this call, I hope to speak with all of you, because we can all learn from each other or have ideas for each other. So I think you've just got to stay out there and be approachable. But at the same time, I think companies have a responsibility to not just flog anybody with deals, like do a little bit of research to make sure that we're appropriate for you, because otherwise you just become noise. Good point.
Ruchi, you must be burning the midnight oil with my candle as well. I have offices in Europe, in Asia, South Asia, and I focus a lot in the Middle East with over 150 clients as well. So there's no such thing as a time zone for me. It's 18-hour day. It's got to be a little bit different for you, or is it the same routine for you to access these types of companies and source?
So we rely quite a lot on referrals. So it's usually like associate networks and family office networks. I think like Catherine and I were together on like 3 different family office networks together. So like having access to such networks helps quite a lot in terms of the deal flow, because like if we rely on our website, I think like we'll get the most left out deals to come to us. So we should be really active in terms of like getting the right kind of deal flow. So apart from family office networks and all, we participate quite a lot in conferences, pitch events, demo days for accelerators and incubators. So that's a good source of getting the deal flow. And especially being in the Middle East, there are a lot of healthcare opportunities that come out of like Southeast Asia as well. And a lot of demo days and accelerators, incubators that host these kind of events. So that's again a big way of getting the right kind of deal flow. And I personally keep traveling quite a lot to mainly the Bay Area. So we do reach out to a number of founders in the West Coast, mainly like the Stanford network that helps out in terms of the deal flow. So that's again a big source of our deal flow, but it's mainly like word of mouth or referrals. In terms of like inbound deal flow, there's nothing much. The kind of deal flow that we get through the website would be like random emails. But if the main interesting deals come out of like the family office networks, conferences, pitch events and all.
Great. So many of the companies early stage that I engage with, I probably see about 800 early stage companies per year. And whenever they ask me, Dave, would you make a kinder introduction to people that you think would be appropriate? I'll either get a one-page teaser and be like, I don't know how much they're learning from that and what they're going to do with it. Or sometimes I've had upwards of a 50-page deck. And really, do you think that that's going to, your job to me, as the founder approaching an investor, is to get enough there to say, I want to have a discussion. What's appropriate? What do you like? And some people have said, look, I can very quickly go through the 40-page deck. Give me it all. And others be like, that's noise to me. Tell me about what you like to see as far as a deck to make that initial introduction to say, I'd like to have some more discussion with this company. Sam, you want to start?
Sure. So I could tell you style is a big part of it. For instance, I'd like to see a deck, probably no more than 15 slides, and not extremely detailed with like tiny writing and arrows all over the place that you have to like spend a lot of time trying to figure out. Nice and simple, fewer than 15 slides, a few bullet points, get the point across. That's my preference. I can tell you my partner, I think, prefers to get a one-page, sheet. So, that works, as well. It depends on who you are. So there's no real, answer. But I think the common point between us is we don't want too much information, but we want enough that we can make a reasonable assessment as to whether we want to have another meeting.
Christian, I see you nodding a lot there. With the 150 that you could have to run through any given month, your preferences?
I'd agree more on the shorter side, condensed, if you can do it in a page and a half, and then the deck, get your point across in 4 slides. As Sam mentioned, simple, know your story. Can you pitch it in the first few minutes, and then have the detail to back it up, to be able to engage an audience and in the right category, right? So.
Yeah, so Ruchi, let's take it in kind of the follow-up question. What are the key elements that you really want to see and understand from, again, you're getting a blind deck from somebody, said, hi, somebody told me to reach out, or I saw you at RESI. I'd like you to look through my deck. What are the key elements that you really need to see that's going to say, I want to talk?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd love to understand the problem statement, like what's the actual need that they're focusing on? And then is the market big enough for like making a return on the investment? And then it comes down to the team and the product that they have built. And if there are any grants or they've won any pitch competitions and all, that actually helps us quite a lot, because it's sort of a validation of like their entire concept, and they've already been some interest in such kind of deals. So that I think that sums it up for us, mainly like for the first glance. I think those are the things that we look at. And if it's a longer slide deck, then we would love to look at a little bit more on like the advisory board, or who are the kind of people who have invested into the company till now.
Catherine, same elements, or do you have a few different?
A little bit different. So because we're so focused on the technical aspects of it, we really do, and we'll sign an NDA to maybe even look at the technical drawings, what they've accomplished so far, to really be able to understand. In some cases, they've sent us the device or a prototype, because not only can we help, obviously, the investment part, but what's more important is helping them commercialize it, because we can say, you know what, you should replace this material with that. We should have it manufactured here, and so that really helps. So in that case, it's a little bit more unusual. So the more information, the better. If they want to send non-confidential at first, that's great. And then have an understanding of where they are in the process, right, is really helpful.
Great.
Can I add 2 cents?
Yeah, please.
I'd say, and knowing the landscape, what's the competitive market? How do you differentiate? And then so often, what's the deal? What are you looking to raise? And what are you going to use the funds for? And sometimes that gets missed.
Yeah, I almost always say, show me the timeline of, here I'm raising $500,000, I'm raising $1 million. What are the use of proceeds, and what are you going to do with it? And where does it get you to that milestone of now I'm off seeking that next part.
One more thing, the exit,
Yeah.
they should have an idea about their exit. At least
What their
have
pathway to
an
exit is.
idea.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. I'm going to use that in about a minute here. Kristen, I made a living of taking somebody. I think everybody wants to say. You mentioned before a big enough exit, and so Kristen, for you, I'd say, I'm sorry, big enough market. Everybody then thought they had to put $1 billion market on every company pitch that it's $1 billion market. I made a living at whittling it down to, okay, what's the real applicable market here? And I'm fine with somebody that's got a $500 million market all to themselves, and it's very innovative and novel, and it's going to be very select, and everybody's going to want to use it. Versus, I'm going after $1 billion market with 20 competitors there. Tell me about how you look at market when you see something. I mean, you talked about competition and so forth.
Sure. And I'd say knowing what you're addressing and what you're focused on. And exactly to your point, if it's, over, it's got to be significant enough to be over, 200 million, if it's 500 million, but be careful on presenting this huge category of cardio or diabetes at a couple of billion. And then by the time you get to yours, it's small. Don't try to, cover that up. Just be transparent and upfront. Here's where we're going. Are you a platform? Can you go to more? And then talk about, what's your plan? Can you get 10x in 4 years? And can you get to the 50 million? And just to have that story baked enough that it supports your financials and it's attractive.
Great. Sam, you mentioned exit. Let's finish up on this one, and then we'll open up to the audience. Some of them take 4 years, some of them take 10 years, and anything in between. Hope not going much past 10 years. I did some analytics. I was looking at, and people were getting really shy before about PMAs. I saw PMAs getting the fastest exits and the best valuations out there. A little more expensive and takes more capital up front, but everybody's got to figure their pathway to get to market best and with the setup that's going to lead to an exit. What's your thesis on exits here?
So in general, we're focused on companies with earlier exits. We just think it de-risks the investment. Once you need to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical studies, things like that, things can go wrong along the way, and your financial projections can be way off, and you may need multiple more rounds of fundraising. We'll get diluted more. We're in early stage. So, to protect our LPs, our investors, we want to focus on something that will not drag on so long. So at least it somehow will protect the downside risk of multiple rounds of investment. So that's how we look at things. So if I see a company, it could be the next Google, but if it's going to take 10 years, we'll probably bow out.
Okay. Ruchi, same for you, or different investment parameters?
Yeah, we rely mainly on companies which would go through the 510K pathway. That becomes much more easier, and we can actually have a clear timeline in mind. But one of the things that we have realized is that oftentimes companies have a lot of IP, and their main goal is just to look for an acquisition partner. And oftentimes that doesn't really materialize. So it should be important that in case there's not an acquisition offer, would that business model be sustainable for the long term in case you don't see an interest from companies that would acquire you? I think that's a critical thing that we have seen recently, because we made a couple of investments and we thought that they would just have an exit, but it didn't happen. So now they have to go to market, and that becomes a long and painful process.
That's certainly part of as we started our whole discussion here, just this ever-changing landscape in medtech, and the last few years, the larger organizations were looking for giant acquisitions, and the tuck-ins just weren't there. They kept kicking the can down the road and show us a little bit more market adoption and de-risk this. In the last year, they had top-line revenue gap, and I've seen a lot more tuck-ins going in the last year in medtech saying, we've got a gap because of COVID. We're down 20% maybe in electives, 30%, and we can add to this, and they have capital to deploy, surely. So we always want to see companies that have a go it alone strategy if that exit isn't there, or they're kind of dead in the water if they can't place that next $10 million commercial round. I guess if anybody wants to offer anything that you thought we hadn't covered, or Karen, I'm not sure if you have any audience questions that people wanted to ask the panelists directly.
Well, the audience hasn't submitted any questions thus far, but if anyone wants to ask them, you can always raise your hand and I can give you permission to ask it in person. So any questions from the audience?
Great. While people line up to raise their hand, did any of our panelists have anything else that they wanted to mention? Yeah, Catherine.
I was just going to say, regarding exits, we are too looking for early exits, and that's what we're trying to help accelerate our companies through, and we'll help with actually even an end buyer. So we're really active on that front. We'd rather have an exit earlier than later, for sure. So we want to then recycle that capital and go out and find more companies. So yeah, for us, and at an inflection point, if the board agrees, we'd rather sell early if we can, and have a solid exit.
So there were a couple of questions. If you want to put your hands back up. Oh, there we go. Marie, go ahead.
Hi, this is Marie Hayes from Octavos Diagnostics in Maine. We're in Portland, Maine. And my question is, as we go and invest time and energy into meeting with folks like yourselves, do we need some kind of accompaniment besides the board? For example, do we need a legal team or a couple of people with us? How do we do this to make sure that we protect our own interests?
Any of the panelists want to take
Well,
that?
if you're doing, I think you need to be clear in what you're comfortable sharing. And remember, if you send someone a deck or a 2-pager, they may forward it. So I would only send out materials that you're completely comfortable with, and then have a data room. And some VCs don't sign NDAs. So you have to figure that out, what you're comfortable with. Other investors will sign NDAs. You have to figure out what you're comfortable with sharing. But you got to understand that most investors don't want to copy your work. They want you to be good. They want you to make money. So you have to balance that, and that's a personal choice. But going with a team of lawyers isn't necessarily attractive because they want to hear from you. They want to hear from the company leadership. It's perfectly normal and acceptable. You're going to need a good lawyer. You're going to need to have solid documents and all of that, and that's completely acceptable. But you want to go in there. They want to speak to you directly. They want to know who the leadership of that company is. So you don't want to bring like a whole entourage necessarily. That's my advice.
Just on a personal note, if I saw a whole group of lawyers coming with, a CEO and one other person, let's say, I'd start thinking, why are they spending so much money on this? Are they really careful about saving their money for when they need it? And, in early stage companies, that's extremely important.
I would echo my other colleagues' comments on just make sure it's non-confidential. And as we talked before, it's the balance of your team and your story and your technology for that first meeting.
Great. Karen, were there any more hands that came up?
There was one more if you still have a question that you want to ask. Oh, I guess not. We are just about out of time anyway. I just want to make sure that the audience knows that I'm sure the panelists would be more than happy to answer any more questions that you have. You can feel free to reach out to them through the partnering platform, and I'm sure they would be happy to continue the discussion with you. Thank you so much to our fabulous panelists. It was a great discussion, and good luck to the audience with the rest of your RESI conference. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck, everyone.
Bye.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.